Dog carries baby in mouth to hospital. What the doctor discovers next is unbelievable. The dawn was quiet in the sleepy neighborhood. The first light crept over the streets, casting long shadows on cracked sidewalks and empty alleys. Not a soul was stirring yet, except for Rex, the old stray dog known to wander the area. Rex was a familiar sight to those who pass by every day. A weathered dog with a silver streak of fur down his back, signs of a hard life etched into his face. He walked with purpose, his eyes scanning his surroundings, every sniff and step a part of his routine search for food scraps and a safe spot to rest. On this particular morning, however, something was different. Rex's ears perked up, catching a faint, unfamiliar sound. So soft, it was nearly drowned out by the gentle rustle of leaves. He stopped in his tracks, listening intently. It was a cry, high-pitched and fragile, drifting out from an alleyway nearby. Rex turned his head, ears cocked, dawned to the sound, like it was calling him. He took a few cautious steps forward, his nose twitching, his instincts telling him to investigate. As he entered the alley, the shadows seemed to deepen around him. There, tucked between a dumpster and a stack of old cardboard boxes, was a small bundle. It looked so out of place, soft, pale fabric, cradled in the dirt and dust of the alley floor. Rex approached slowly, lowering his nose to the ground, his body tense but drawn forward by the faint whimpering. He gently nudged the bundle with his nose, and as it shifted, he saw a tiny face peeking out. Eyes shut tight and cheeks flushed. It was a baby, no bigger than a loaf of bread, wrapped in a thin blanket that did little to keep the morning chill away. The baby's face twisted in discomfort, letting out another soft cry that seemed to echo in the quiet. Rex stepped back, staring down at the baby, his mind almost processing the impossible sight before him. He took a moment, a strange flicker of something like concern crossing his eyes. Then, almost as if he knew what he had to do, Rex bent down carefully, grasping the edge of the blanket in his mouth. With surprising gentleness, he lifted the tiny bundle and turned back toward the street, his path clear and his steps steady. The journey was just beginning. Welcome back to PlotTwister. Before we unravel today's mystery, don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the notification bell so you're always in the loop. Rex moved carefully, his paws padding softly against the concrete as he carried the baby through the empty streets. The small bundle dangled gently from his mouth, and he took each step with a careful precision. That betrayed his usual rugged, stray dog demeanor. The morning sun was beginning to rise, casting a soft glow over the quiet neighborhood. But Rex's focus never wavered. His senses seemed to be tuned in to one thing only, the tiny, vulnerable life he held in his jaws. As he passed by a few early morning joggers, people stopped and stared, eyes wide with confusion and disbelief. They watched this unlikely scene unfold. A stray dog trotting down the sidewalk with a baby in tow, cradled as if it were the most precious thing in the world. Some hesitated, raising their phones to snap pictures, while others whispered to each other, wondering if they should intervene. But Rex didn't pay them any attention. His eyes were fixed ahead, his pace steady, his purpose unshakable. The baby let out a soft whimper, a tiny cry that seemed to echo off the silent buildings. Rex paused for a moment, his ears twitching at the sound, and he lowered his head just slightly, as if to reassure the little one. For a brief moment, his eyes softened, and he held the baby with an even gentler grip before continuing on his way. As Rex approached the main road, the noise of early morning traffic picked up, cars zooming by, unaware of the small miracle unfolding nearby. He paused at the curb, waiting for a break in the rush of vehicles, and then dashed across, careful and deliberate, holding his precious cargo securely. Finally, in the distance, the familiar sight of a hospital came into view. The large brick building loomed over the street, a place of healing and hope, a place where people went for help. Rex didn't hesitate. He trotted up the path toward the hospital's entrance, drawing curious stares from passerbys. Nurses on their smoke break outside gasped, covering their mouths as they watched the stray dog approach with an unexpected passenger. Rex stopped just outside the hospital doors, gently setting the baby down on the ground, then backing away. His eyes steady, watching, as if waiting for someone to come and take over. The first whispers of hope stirred in the air. Rex waited, standing a short distance from the hospital entrance, his eyes fixed on the small bundle he had carefully placed by the door. The baby lay still, wrapped tightly in its thin blanket, only the soft rise and fall of its chest betraying the life within. Nurses and staff moved in and out of the hospital, some of them pausing to glance curiously at the stray dog, who stood almost sentinel-like near the entrance. But it was Nurse Linda who stopped dead in her tracks, her hand instinctively going to her mouth as she realized what she was seeing. Linda, a kind woman with years of experience, recognized the small shape on the ground almost instantly. Her eyes widened as she took in the unlikely scene. The abandoned baby, the watchful dog. She knelt down beside the tiny bundle, her voice soft as she spoke to soothe the little one. She looked over at Rex, who hadn't moved an inch, as if he were rooted to the spot, until he was sure someone would care for the baby. As Linda gathered the baby into her arms, Rex stayed where he was, watching her every move, his intense gaze following the baby with a sort of protective instinct. Linda looked back at him, her heart swelling with gratitude and amazement at the sight of this unlikely hero. She carried the baby inside, glancing over her shoulder to see if the dog would follow, but Rex simply sat down by the door, his eyes never leaving her. Inside, Linda hurried to get the baby to a doctor. Her co-workers gathered around, murmuring in shock as she quickly explained how the child had arrived. Word of the mysterious stray dog and his precious cargo spread quickly, and soon even Dr. Mark, the physician on duty, came to see the baby. He listened, nodding in disbelief, his eyes darting to the door where Rex still sat, like a guardian waiting for news. Outside, Rex remained by the hospital entrance, unmoved by the passing crowds and bustling cars. He was vigilant, waiting for any sign of the child's condition, as if he understood the importance of what he'd done. With each passing moment, a new curiosity grew among the hospital staff. People passing by and even the local police who had begun to arrive. In the early morning light, Rex sat alone, patient and unwavering, his duty not yet done. Inside the hospital, Nurse Linda rushed the baby to the examination room, her heart racing. Dr. Mark, a man with a calm demeanor and years of experience, quickly took over. He carefully unwrapped the baby, his hands gentle but precise, revealing a tiny, vulnerable face, cheeks flushed and eyes still closed. The baby was small, too small, and as Dr. Mark checked the little one's vitals, a quiet tension filled the room. The hospital staff had gathered nearby, whispering among themselves. Some shared stories they'd heard from Linda, marveling at the stray dog who had brought the baby to their doorstep. Outside, Rex still sat by the entrance, his eyes fixed on the doors, as though he could sense the urgency of the situation within. Dr. Mark continued his examination, his brow furrowing slightly as he listened to the baby's heartbeat. The child was weak but stable, showing signs of exhaustion and a lack of nourishment. He carefully checked the baby's tiny fingers and toes, his gaze lingering as he noticed a small, distinct mark on the baby's right ankle. A birthmark, oval-shaped, slightly faded, but unmistakable. He paused, feeling a faint flicker of recognition, as though he'd seen a similar mark before, though he couldn't quite place it. Linda, standing nearby, caught the slight hesitation in Dr. Mark's movements. Her eyes followed his gaze to the birthmark, and she too felt a strange sense of familiarity, though she didn't dare speak it out loud. For a moment she glanced back at the door, half expecting the dog to have followed them inside. The image of Rex waiting patiently outside seemed to be burned into everyone's minds, as if he were part of the story in ways they didn't yet understand. As Dr. Mark finished his examination, he gave a small nod of reassurance to Linda. The baby, though frail, was stable and in no immediate danger. The tension in the room eased, but a quiet curiosity remained, lingering in the air like an unspoken question. One of the nurses gently wrapped the baby in a fresh, warm blanket, and Linda held the child close, her heart swelling with relief and a feeling she couldn't quite name. She glanced one last time toward the hospital entrance, where Rex still waited, as if he knew his journey had led to something far more meaningful than anyone could yet comprehend. Dr. Mark stood in the hallway, the quiet hum of the hospital around him, but his thoughts were anything but calm. That small oval birthmark on the baby's ankle kept nagging at him, stirring a memory he couldn't quite place. He had seen something like it before, he was certain, but the specifics stayed just out of reach. He glanced at Linda, who had been with him through the examination, her eyes filled with the same quiet wonder and concern that seemed to ripple through the hospital staff. As word of the mysterious baby and the heroic dog spread, a sense of urgency grew among those who'd heard the story. Local authorities arrived, eager to gather information. Officer Blake, a seasoned policeman with a gentle demeanor, took Linda aside, asking for every detail about how the baby had been found. She recounted the scene at the hospital entrance, the way Rex had sat patiently watching over the baby, his unwavering loyalty clear in his steady gaze. The story moved quickly beyond the hospital walls. A reporter arrived, snapping pictures of the hospital entrance where Rex still sat, now drawing a small crowd. People pointed, whispered, and few even reached out to pet him. But he remained alert, his attention only briefly diverted from the doors. His presence added an air of mystery, a silent witness to the story no one could yet understand. Meanwhile, back inside, Officer Blake began to sift through recent missing persons reports, looking for any record of a baby that might match this one's description. Dr. Mark's mind returned again and again to the birthmark. He couldn't shake the feeling that he'd seen it before, in connection with a case long ago, one that had faded into the background over time, but had never really left his mind. Linda, too, found herself drawn to the baby's small face, wondering where he had come from, who he belonged to, and how he'd ended up in that alley. There was a feeling, deep and unspoken, that this little child carried a story with him, something hidden and precious waiting to be uncovered. Outside, as the sun rose higher, Rex remained at his post by the hospital doors, his eyes ever watchful, his purpose unwavering. Those who passed by began to feel the weight of his presence, the sense that this dog, like the baby, held a secret of his own, one that had somehow, impossibly, brought them together on this day. As the day wore on, Officer Blake continued his search through old files, sifting through years of missing persons reports in hopes of finding any lead. Hours passed with no sign of a match, but he persisted, his gaze fixed on each page, each name, each small detail that might unlock the mystery. Dr. Mark checked in frequently, the birthmark still haunting his thoughts. The small, distinct mark on the baby's ankle felt like a key, a tiny clue pointing towards something bigger. Then, as if by chance, Blake's eyes fell upon a report from several years ago. His hand paused mid-page, his breath catching as he read the words in front of him. The report detailed a baby who had gone missing from a nearby town, a baby boy with an oval birthmark on his ankle, an unmistakable detail. He scanned the rest of the report, his heart pounding as he noted the descriptions, the dates, everything aligned perfectly. Blake immediately called Dr. Mark, who listened in stunned silence. His thoughts racing, he had remembered that birthmark for a reason. This child was not just any baby. He was the long-missing grandson of an elderly couple, the Harrises, who had searched tirelessly for him years ago, but had all but given up hope. The news sent a ripple through the hospital staff, who gathered in disbelief, murmuring in awe at the discovery. When word reached the Harrises, they arrived at the hospital, their faces lined with age and the marks of years spent longing for answers. As they approached, their eyes filled with a mixture of hope and fear, afraid to believe it could truly be their grandson after so much time. Dr. Mark led them to the baby, and as they looked at his tiny face, their eyes brimmed with tears. They recognized him, as if they'd known him all along. In the midst of their tearful reunion, Linda glanced toward the hospital entrance, where Rex still waited, his eyes alert and fixed on the doors. With tears in her eyes, she called him inside, and for the first time, Rex crossed the threshold, approaching the couple and the baby with his gentle, watchful gaze. The Harrises, overwhelmed with gratitude, knelt down and held Rex close, understanding that this stray dog had brought them back the peace of their hearts they thought they'd lost forever. In a final act of love, the Harrises decided to take Rex home with them, welcoming him into their family as both a hero and a friend. And so the baby found his family, and Rex, the once lonely stray, finally found a home. What are your thoughts on the twist we uncovered today? Comment your ideas below. Make sure to like and subscribe for a daily dose of drama and mystery. We'll see you with another twist.